All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. For those who are new to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we're all about bringing science, adventure, exploration, and conservation live into classrooms across North America. And then during these challenging times, we've been broadcasting live into the homes of parents, teachers, and educators all across North America. This is also one of our favorite weeks of the year. Monday was World Ocean Day, but here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we like to celebrate all week long, and we posted close to 20 ocean scientists and explorers from around the world who have taken us below the surface, taught us all about conservation, how amazing our oceans are, and of course, the threats that they're facing due to our activities. But it's not all bad news. We've heard a lot of good news conservation stories this week as well. So today's event, I'm really excited. We've got Ted Steinberg joining us. He's an endurance artist who has competed in Ironman, triathlons, and ultra marathons for quite some time. Some of these can be up to 145 miles nonstop, and he's learned all about human performance and how emotion can be just as important as chemistry. So in a few days, he's about to embark on an epic journey in a 23-foot rowboat rowing from San Francisco to Hawaii solo, all by himself. This is going to be a 2,500-mile journey that could last up to 3 months. He's calling it the United World Challenge. It's a collaborative project to inspire more courageous worlds and spark new action to clean our oceans. So Tez, it's so great to have you joining us live today. We're excited to get to know you a bit more and learn all about this amazing journey you're about to undertake.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'm really excited to be here.
All right, excellent. Well, you had an exciting event this week. The boat arrived.
Yeah, we've been working on building it for over 2 years, and I just picked it up a few days ago from where it was built in Washington, in Port Townsend, Washington, and I towed it down to the San Francisco Bay Area where I am now getting ready to launch.
All right. So I know you have a few things you want to share with us. You want to show us the boat, some of the gear you're going to use, but I have to ask you first about some of the other things that you've done. So these ultra marathons sound absolutely incredible, absolutely grueling in some cases. How do you prepare yourself for a challenge like that?
Well, it's not something you can take on overnight, right? It started with a short triathlon, something that lasts just an hour, and I just got hooked when I tried it. I was not feeling my best when I signed up for these things at first, and over the course of 10 years of doing these different events, I realized I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was. And so it's not, like I said, something you can just learn to do right away, but it was something I found I loved. And the great thing about running, for example, is you just need a pair of shoes. It's accessible to anyone and you can explore the world that way. So it never felt like something I had to prepare for as much as something I really love doing.
All right. Well, I would love to learn a little bit more about the United World Challenge. I'd love to learn more about your home in a couple of weeks, your
Yeah.
home away from home, and just what it's going to take to make this happen.
Yeah, Joe. So this 23-foot boat that I'm on right now, like you said, it'll be my home. So I'll have everything I need for the entire crossing. That means carrying all my food, having the equipment to produce water, bringing communications equipment to stay in touch with land. And so I can share all of that with you and our participants today. And over the next few minutes, I'd love to share just 5 things that I think are really surprising about ocean rowing. I'm not competing in a race; it's just me rowing, but there are a lot of things about ocean rowing when someone rows across an ocean with no sail, no motors, just oars. And I think you can see two of the oars behind me here. They're wooden oars, and that's the only means of propulsion. So I want to share 5 things that make this a pretty unique experience. How does that sound, Joe? Great.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So the first, I'm the only one in the boat, but this is a team project, and um, I think I want to emphasize that point because we have this kind of cultural fallacy, this idea of a lone wolf or a hero, and people could easily mistake this project for that. But I want to emphasize how important it is to have a team supporting me and anyone who wants to do something big. And an interesting fact about ocean rowing. So when I'm out in the middle of the ocean, there'll be times, Joe, where the people nearest to me are in the International Space Station. Then my nearest human neighbors are in outer space. So you think, well, how do they pull off a space project with a massive team, right? So many people supporting. And in my case, there's people supporting from media. I have expert advisors, folks who have rowed other oceans. I have coaches who have helped me build my endurance and nutrition. And then people who just are there in my corner to support me emotionally and spiritually to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, right? And so that's the first point. If you have big dreams, whether it's ocean rowing or anything else, the first thing is think about a team, because that's really the most important part. The second point is endurance, right? So I'll be rowing 12 hours a day, doing 2-hour shifts, row for 2 hours, eat, navigate, clean, take photos, send them back, all those activities, but 6 2-hour shifts a day. And for the first week, it'll actually be more like 18 hours of rowing a day or more, because getting away from getting away from California is the hardest part of the journey. And so the question is, well, how could someone possibly have that much endurance? And part of it is training, but a big part of it is eating. Ocean rowing is an eating contest. And so I'll be eating about 6,000 calories a day. And the only way to bring that much food for the journey, which is about 500,000 calories in total, is with these dehydrated meals. So I'll be getting very familiar with a handful of different meals that I'll be eating 4 or 5 times a day, plus over 2,000 calories of snacks. For the students listening today, imagine eating 3 breakfasts, 3 lunches, and 3 dinners. That's basically what I'll be doing every single day. And I put on extra weight because even while eating that much, I'll still lose 10 to 20% of my body weight in the crossing. So that's the second piece of the endurance aspect. The third, as you know, Joe, there's the Great Pacific Garbage Patch directly between California and Hawaii, and I'll be rowing straight through it. Now, there's a lot of research going on about the Pacific Garbage Patch, but we still don't know everything about it. We know a few things, that just 1% of the plastic is at the surface, but where's the rest? Some of it is beneath the surface, some of it is on the ocean floor, and some of it actually breaks down into tiny particles, we think, and gets into the air. So we know that there are microfibers from our clothing distributed all over the world through the atmosphere. What I've done is I'm partnering with a lab at Scripps Institute to gather microfiber samples from the air using a really simple method, double sticky tape, which I'm gonna put on my cabin, and every day take 1 sample, store it in a baggie, label where I took it, the weather conditions, and also tell the lab what kind of clothing I'm wearing so they can take that out of their analysis. And we're going to be able to see whether microfibers are coming into the air from the sea spray, as in when waves form and they blast off little particles, are we getting plastic in the air from that? So that's a piece of this rowing project that I think is really exciting, because that's a data set no one has ever collected. And in addition, through the crowdfund and donations, we're also collecting, funding the collection of ocean plastic through the sale of these ocean bottles, which funds the collection of ocean plastic. I can say more about that, but that's the third piece, is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and research. A fourth item, folks often want to know, well, what about waves? What about sharks? And so animals in nature. The amazing thing about rowing across the Pacific, one amazing thing is just the amount of wildlife that's out there. I'll see whales and dolphins and sharks, and I'm really excited to see that wildlife show. That was one of my big motivations for getting out there. And as you can imagine, a whale, they don't often see a rowing boat, right? They're like, what is that thing floating on the surface that doesn't make any noise? Because they're used to these boats that are noisy, and they'll come up and look at you. And I hear from other rowers that sometimes they'll circle the boat for hours just hanging out with you, really curious. So I'm excited about that. It's not all fun and rainbows though. I will face storms, and the way these boats are designed, no matter what the storm is, they can survive it. So the 2 cabins, there's a cabin on either end. They're basically air bubbles that are airtight, and the bottom of the boat is weighted and heavy. So if the boat capsizes, it just rights itself right away. And when conditions are rough, I'll go into the cabin and secure myself in there and wait it out. And anytime I'm on deck, I'm tied to the boat. This is a tether, which is attaches to a climbing harness around my waist. And there's a lifeline to my right here. So that anytime I'm on deck, no matter what the conditions are, even if it's perfectly calm, I'm attached. And so, because we can't predict what's going to happen with nature, and you never know when a big rogue wave comes, and they do appear out of nowhere, I need to be always looking after my safety, staying attached to the boat at all times, keeping the cabin doors closed. So there are a few things like that. I'm happy to answer some questions around what other things we're doing about safety. And the fifth point I wanted to share, Joe, is people ask about time alone. 2 to 3 months without seeing anybody else. And so then the question is, how do you do that? Well, a part of it is I will be alone in the boat, but I'll be in touch with people, my advisors, sharing the story with others. And so I'm using different technologies. I'm sure you're familiar with a device like this, Joe. This is a BGAN unit. So this sets up a little Wi-Fi network through satellite internet. And I'll use this to send back videos and photos and audio samples and blogs that we're going to build into an interactive map on my website and other sites to share the journey live with anyone who wants to follow. And so, yes, I'll be alone, but I'm actually going to be very connected. And for me, a big part of this journey is to share the story with others. And so, again, I'm really grateful to be here and share the story today. And I'm really excited to answer any questions folks have.
All right, excellent. Before we jump to some questions, Tez, are you able to take your phone and move around the boat a little? We'd love to see some of the cabin,
Absolutely.
get a
Yep.
sense of the size, see what we're
Yep.
dealing with.
Yeah, so what you can see here, this is the deck, right? This is the exterior deck. And at my feet, this is where my feet strap in, and I sit on that seat that rolls back and forth. And so that is my rowing seat. Now, an interesting thing, I'm actually facing backwards. That's the bow of the boat. So I'm only ever looking where I come from, not where I'm going. But what that means is I have a couple devices on deck here. This is an instrument display that reads out my GPS. So that's a compass, and I can set it up to different screens to tell me where I'm trying to go and give me indications. So I know, okay, I'm aiming for 100 miles off, ticking off these different waypoints until I reach Hawaii. Beneath my feet, all these hatches, there are 13 of these hatches, which are really quite large. In fact, I'll have empty space on this boat, despite filling it up with about 40 gallons of emergency drinking water and 500,000 calories of food and all sorts of stuff. I'll still have empty space. But those are airtight, watertight containers. That's where I'll store my supplies. Back here in the back, it's I just have some things stored here, but this is where I'll store a lot of my equipment. So I have straps that I can tie things down, and equipment like a parachute anchor. The ocean is miles and miles deep. So when I need to stop, sometimes I'll be drifting the right direction, but if I'm drifting in the wrong direction or I need to stabilize the boat, I can drop a parachute anchor. It's the size of maybe 8 feet diameter, and it trails behind the boat or in front of the boat about 150 feet, and that stabilizes the boat. So equipment like that, the emergency equipment, I'll store in the back. And in the bow cabin up here, this is where I'll sleep. This is my home. So I've got cushions that go here, more hatches to store equipment, and this is my navigation setup. So I've got my GPS pulled up here. If we zoom in close, you can see here we are in the San Francisco Bay Area. All of my switches, a VHF radio, an Iridium Go, which is another satellite device. And down here, you can see my power setup system. So I've got 2 lithium-ion batteries, 100 amp hours each, for 200 amp hour bank in total, which is a significant amount of power. Now, the power, Joe, is people think, well, that must be for your navigation equipment. That's actually not the most important piece of equipment. The most important piece of equipment is my water maker, because I can't possibly bring enough water for the whole trip. The water I bring is just emergency in case my water maker breaks. But so the water maker fits inside of there. And in the event it breaks, I also have this device here, which is basically a hand pump. And using simply the power of my hand, I'll be able to turn salt water into drinking water, but it's very slow. I would need to spend about 4 hours to make a gallon of water. And so that's all time I would not be able to row or do anything else. So that's a very last case scenario. Now I'll step out of the boat here and give you a sense of what it looks like from the side. Can I flip the camera around on this? Yes. All right, let me do that. Oh, almost. There we go.
There you go.
All right. So you can get a sense of the scale now. It's 23 feet long and a unicorn, because I want it to be fun. I want to inspire people to think this isn't just hard work. Yes, there's hard work involved, but it's also fun. Now, people want to often guess how much the boat weighs. Joe, could you venture a guess how much this boat weighs without equipment?
Without equipment.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's going to be pretty light, so I'm going to go 400 to 500 pounds.
Wow, that's an impressively close guess, Joe. You are very, very close. It's even lighter. It's actually 275 pounds before adding equipment, because it's made of carbon fiber. So there's a thin layer of carbon fiber on the outside, then foam core, a ½ inch of foam, and then carbon fiber on the inside. And yeah, so it's amazingly light. The weight is the solar panels and the batteries rather, and the various emergency equipment and the food and so forth. So I'll point out just one other thing here. You don't want very many holes in a boat. This is one hole that I'll need. This is where the brine out comes out of my water maker. So there's a hole underneath that draws water into the water maker, into that hatch I showed you. Through a series of really strong pumps, it pushes all of the salt out of that water, and then it dumps the really salty water out of the bow here. And then I have a little hose that I can use to fill up all of my bottles.
All right. So you mentioned that the water maker, obviously very important. You need power. You mentioned the GPS equipment, obviously very important. For me, I think third important for me would be music. Do you have a nice sound system on board?
Yeah. Well, I have several sets of headphones, because I don't know how long they'll last. The ocean really tends to ruin things. I have one Bluetooth speaker. So I definitely plan to listen to some music and a lot of audiobooks. I got a small sponsorship from Audible, and so I have about 40 audiobooks that I can get through on the crossing as well.
All right, very cool. So let's get a little Q&A action going here. So those tuning in via YouTube, I can see a few have already used the chat sidebar. Send us in some questions there, and we'll work some of those in. We've got Miss Erickson representing some students in Stafford Springs, Connecticut. So if you just shoot me a little message in the chat, I can pick on you for a couple questions too. But let's get started with the first one that came in. So Joe is asking about what happens when a big boat flips the wave over. I know you mentioned that it's able to right itself. How does that system work?
So it's just built into the way it's just part of the design. As long as the doors are closed, because these two cabins are basically air pockets, and the bottom of the boat is where I store all my equipment, it'll just flip itself over. It's kind of like trying to think of an object, and that's really it's just unstable upside down. So if it finds itself upside down because a wave pushed it, it'll just on its own, through the heaviness of the bottom of the boat, right itself. The one caveat to that is if the cabin doors are open when the wave comes, because then the cabin could flood and then it wouldn't self-right. Now it wouldn't sink. It's still so buoyant that it won't sink, but that's a situation I really need to avoid. So anytime I come out or into the cabin, close the door.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I was just gonna go with another question, but absolutely, if you want to share another point, go ahead.
No, let's take some more questions.
Okay. And I imagine when you crash for the night, obviously the door closes and you strap yourself in, because the last thing you'd want is for the boat to go over and you're sleeping. You find yourself on the roof and then back over.
Exactly, yeah. And I have a little helmet as well that I can wear when conditions are rough.
Excellent. All right. So Brooklyn and Rain are tuning in and they are wondering about what you're most looking forward to. So, what experience do you want to have the most while you're out and rowing?
You know, one thing I'm really looking forward to is this is a little abstract, but just doing it. So I've been working on this for 3.5 years, building the boat for over two. And so just being out there and being able to do this project will already, irrespective of what the specific experience is at that moment, the fact that I'm out there and doing it is an amazing thing. And just reflecting on all the support I've had, so many sponsors and crowdfund backers, and so that's one thing, is just the great gratitude I have for being able to do it. Um, the other thing I'm really looking forward to is getting to know myself really well. That amount of time to myself. Now I love other people. I love public speaking. I love talks. I love hanging out with my friends and family, just like anybody else. But I'm really curious what it's going to be like to spend that much time alone. And I don't know what it'll be like, but I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Ms. Erickson, I'll pop your microphone on. We'll see if we have some questions from our students in Stafford Springs.
Yes, Reed, you can unmute your mic. You wanted to ask about tying himself to the boat. Go ahead. Reed, you can unmute your mic. Oh, maybe she's having some technical difficulties. She'd like to know why you would tie yourself to the boat when it's calm.
Great question. Just prudence, just being careful. I could slip, I could fall, and I could fall into the water. And one thing that scares me about this, if I thought of a scenario that scared me, it would be being in the water and losing contact with my boat. That would be really unfortunate. So no matter what the conditions are, I'll just be attached to the boat. And I will get in the water and go swimming. That's one thing I'm really looking forward to as well, for the previous question, is swimming in 3 miles of ocean will be an amazing experience. But when I get in the water, I'll still be attached to the boat, and I'll get in to clean the bottom of the hull to remove barnacles and algae and other growth that slows the boat down. But anytime I'm on the deck or in the water, I have to be attached, because you just don't know what's going to happen, and safety comes first.
All right. Ray would like to know about any training trips you've taken. How long were they? Where were they?
So I just got off of a training trip in Washington. I spent 2 nights rowing, 3 days rowing in the Puget Sound. And as you know, it was just a full moon a few days ago. And that's when I was rowing. And the moon creates the tides. So with a full moon, we had a king tide, which was a really strong tide. So it was an excellent training experience because the tide was so strong fighting it. And rowed, it was about 10, 12 miles a day. So not very far, but the important thing was getting familiar with the equipment on the boat rather than how far I'll go. When I'm on the ocean, I expect to go more between hopefully 30 and 40 miles a day. The difference is when I stop rowing, once I'm far enough off the coast and I have the assistance of some trade winds, I should go more or less in the right direction. And I'm not worried about drifting into land like I was on the coast. So for this training row, I had to drop an anchor at night and pay attention to where I'm drifting, versus when I'm on the ocean, I will be able to go to sleep, and I have to pay attention to if other boats come in the area. But for the most part, I'm able to do some drifting. Now, as far as the training I've done for the past couple of years, it's been based in the gym. The boat wasn't ready until just last week. And so I did a little training in my boat builder's boat, but mostly what I was doing was weight training, physical training, and a lot of mental training. Because here's the thing, everybody gets tired in ocean rowing. No matter how strong you are, there'll be points you want to quit. And I know that'll be the case with me. And it's not my physical strength that'll help me get through that, Joe. It's my mental strength, my mental resilience, my emotional awareness to understand, why am I feeling this way right now? And every day is an opportunity to practice that. Whether it's an interaction I'm having, when something isn't going the way I want it, when I have a setback, reinterpreting how I'm looking at that has been the biggest part of my training, much bigger than the time, spent in the gym. So it's that mental piece that's actually the most important component of this.
All right. So you mentioned earlier that it's about a team. You're out on the water, but there's a team who supported you to get this far. There's a team who's probably keeping track of you and updating websites and such at home. And part of that team is people who have experience rowing across oceans. I'm curious about advice they've given you. What is some of the advice that you have been given from seasoned ocean rowers who have crossed ahead of you?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing is careful with your expectations. I have a lot of ambitions around the media project, but the most important thing here is realizing this is going to be way harder than even I know or I expect. And not just a little bit harder, but way harder. And I know that, but still, when you've probably had this experience, you do something and you're like, if I knew before I began, not sure I would have done this. And just being ready for that, right? And remaining flexible and adaptable. Being patient and understanding with yourself, because it's a very new and hard environment. And what to share with friends and family in advance, because on the other side of the row, you definitely are looking forward to seeing people, and I know I will be, but I'll be a little weird. It's you come back off the boat after a couple of months and haven't had a conversation, and so people are like, other rowers say, just let people know you'll need a few days to get back to life, get used to life on land again. So things like that.
All right, very cool. Ms. Erickson, if you want to turn your microphone on, sounds like you have another question for us.
Riley, you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Have you been to Hawaii before?
Have I done what before?
To Hawaii.
Have I? Great question. No, I've never been to Hawaii, so I'm really excited to go for the first time.
So I think this is a good chance to talk a little bit about how people can follow along, Tez. How can people follow along, keep up to date with what you're doing? What should we be doing when you leave in, say, 2 weeks from now?
Look up United World Challenge. You can see it on my shirt here. United World Challenge on Facebook, Instagram, if you use those. UnitedWorldChallenge.org is also a great place to follow, because that's where we'll have a live map that shows all the photos and videos on the route that I'm traveling. And for folks who listen to podcasts, I'll also be sending audio samples back to a podcast producer who then creates weekly episodes, interviews guests like other ocean rowers to hear my reflections and what I'm going through on the ocean, and also add some context why he might be feeling this way, or talk to the scientist that I'll be providing this data for, who can talk a bit more about ocean plastic and the research and what we'll do with this information. And so folks who like podcasts, look up United World Challenge on any podcast platform.
All right, so it sounds like we'll be able to be pretty interactive. I assume there's a tracker, so we'll be able to see approximately where you are. Sounds like you'll send some media, some blog posts. So I think it's going to be a great way to follow you all summer long. Be a part of the journey.
That's right. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah.
Yep.
And 100% when you get to Hawaii, after you've had a few days, because it sounds like you'll need a few days, but we want to host another one of these events, and we want to see you and how you're doing, and because I think that's going to be a ton of fun.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, absolutely. Count me in for that.
Perfect. So logistically, how hard is it to get your hands on a boat like this?
Well, I first started thinking about ocean rowing. I decided to row an ocean in November of 2016. And I've been working really hard since then. So that should give you a sense. It's been 3.5 years of thinking about it, over 2 years of building the boat. It takes an enormous amount of coordination and effort. For folks who are in a team, you can divide that work up between 2, 3, 4 people. As a solo rower, it's really a very large undertaking. But what's amazing, Joe, is I think we overestimate how much we can do in 1 year. A year isn't that long, but in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, can do so much. And so, yeah, it's an enormous effort, but with enough time, it can really come together with even more. I've been wanting to be on Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants and supporting your organization, sharing the story for so long, and this is, it's so great that we have this opportunity now. So I'm just with the amount of time, things come together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, what you're doing is incredible, and to be able to follow along from home, I think is really exciting. We're in challenging times right now, uncharted waters here on land, and I think a story like yours and something that gets students excited and they can follow along all summer, I think is the perfect thing.
Thanks, Joe. And there's one other way that students can follow along as well. So I have a teammate who just did her PhD in oceanography at Scripps, and she's designing a set of lessons for students to learn about marine science and coding. So to do marine science, you need to do coding, right? And coding is also a great skill for so many other jobs. And so she's designing 5 lesson plans that students can access through unitedworldchallenge.org on the story map, where we'll share the story. And every 2 weeks throughout the row, we'll roll out a new plan that students can download, teachers can download. It's open source curricula to learn about wave structure and plastic and ocean climate or ocean currents. And that's just another way that students can follow along and be part of the journey.
All right, excellent. Miss Erickson, I'll get you to turn your mic on again, and if you have a question or two, feel free to let a couple students go.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Caitlin, you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Do you have a pretty good idea where you're going to land on Hawaii?
Definitely. Yeah, that's an important thing. So I'll land in Waikiki, which is in Honolulu. A lot of the Hawaiian islands have really steep cliffs, and I can't even land on a sandy beach because of the way the boat is designed. I need to land at a dock. So I know exactly where I'm going, and I'll be thinking of that the whole way across.
All right.
And Jordan has a question. Jordan, you can unmute your mic.
Do you go with anyone else when you go on the trips?
So this will be my first ocean row, and it'll be just me in the boat. So an important part of my training was doing it with just myself as well. But that doesn't mean I'm not in touch with people. So I use different devices like this satellite phone to be in touch with the woman who actually built the boat. She's rowed oceans before, and she'll be giving me advice and direction every day on weather systems and if I have a technical issue. So even though I'm alone in the boat, I'm very much supported and in touch with people who are helping me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, very cool. So I've been watching behind you. I've been looking at those 2 oars that you have out to show us. And I'm assuming you've got a couple extra ones, a couple backup ones that'll be on the boat.
That's right. Yeah, I have 4 in total.
Yeah. So I've read a few stories, a few ocean rower biographies, and they do break sometimes. I'm sure you know all about that.
They definitely break. These ones haven't before, but oars do break. And so it's important to bring some spares and a lot of equipment to make repairs.
Now, I know there's a lot of rules, or not rules, but certain ways, like you can call a voyage unassisted if you don't come in contact with somebody, or something as simple as if you encounter another ship and they hand you a bottle of water, it's not unassisted anymore. Is that things you're thinking about, or are you just going with the flow?
I really don't mind. I'm not out to set a world record. I think I totally respect people who want to set world records and prove that something can be done unassisted. I think if I meet someone in the middle of the ocean by chance, a sailing boat, and we want to have a picnic together, I wouldn't turn it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned keeping an eye out for other boats. Will you cross through any shipping lanes? Sometimes those ocean freighters can just be massive, and spotting a small unicorn on the water isn't easy.
That's right. Yeah, they won't see me at all visually. So what I have on the boat is an AIS system, an automatic identification system. It's basically a radar. And so that is perhaps the second most important piece of equipment that I have that runs off of my electronics, because I will cross shipping lanes, especially at the start. So leaving from San Francisco, there are a lot of freighters that come into the bay and run up and down the California coast. And so for the first week, I will be monitoring that system very closely at night. I'll have it set up with an alarm to go off if a boat comes within a certain distance. And I also have on right now, I don't know if you can see this navigation light up here, right? So, but that small light, nobody's gonna see it. I'll have it on, but it's that radar that's really the important piece of equipment to prevent the crash.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple more questions coming in via YouTube. The first one here is from Nicole, and she's wondering if you have the trip or the journey kind of loosely mapped out, and is there some piece of equipment you use to kind of follow that?
Great question. So the interesting thing about launching from a continent versus an island is it has to be adaptive. I know what route I would like to take, but it's going to depend so much on wind and weather conditions that first week that I'm on the water, that mapping it out isn't that helpful. I'll map out some points, but I won't stick to them because I have to adapt to what I'm presented with. So I will use this GPS behind me here, this black screen, and I'll load different points that I could hit. And I'll have a few different scenarios, Joe, so I can switch between maps. So once I end up in a certain situation after 1 or 2 weeks on the ocean and there's a little more stability to my plans and direction, then I might be able to line up with a different set of points that I can take. But for the first week or two, it's just about getting as far away from the coast as possible so that the conditions stabilize and I get out of those shipping lanes.
All right. So Joe's tuning in online. Joe is wondering, I think you mentioned that you would row 2-hour kind of stints before a break. How many of those 2-hour blocks will you have in one day?
During most of the crossing, I expect to do 6 of those shifts a day. During the first week or two, it could be more like 9 or 10 of those shifts per day for a few reasons. One, the tides in the San Francisco Bay Area are huge, and those tides extend out past the coast a good distance. So even when I'm well off the coast, I'll still be under the effect of those tides, as well as the shipping lanes, as well as a continental weather pattern, so that during the day, it's really hot up here. The sun is baking the Californian coast. At night, when the temperature cools, that warm land causes the air to rise, and then it pulls in a breeze from the ocean. If I stop rowing, no one else is rowing, and that breeze is going to pull me back to shore. So as long as I'm near the continent, those effects are something I'm working against, and I'll need to be going around the clock until I can get far enough away from the continent that those effects aren't really an impact anymore. So it may be more like 10 2-hour shifts for the first week or two. And that's why once I get everything ready here and pack the boat and get it in the water, I'm going to take a good 3-4 days just to rest and eat and sleep, because once I start, there won't be stopping until I break out.
Yeah. I'm just kind of picturing it right now. So I was on an ocean expedition on a big science vessel, and we left from San Francisco out into the bay. We went under the bridge, and it was pretty cool leaving the harbor, leaving the bay. And I'm just picturing you in the little boat, just moving under the bridge and making your way out. It's going to be pretty amazing.
It'll be surreal. Yeah, I've been looking forward to it for a long time.
All right, Miss Erickson, if you have another question or two, we're getting close to our time to wrap, but we'd love to see if there's a couple more in Connecticut.
Okay, Caitlin, go ahead.
Do you plan to stay in Hawaii a little while before you go back?
Yeah, Caitlin, I expect I'll stay there for a couple of weeks and enjoy myself and do a lot of eating and catching up with friends and family.
And I just had a quick question too. First of all, thank you for tying in lessons with coding and the importance that our students need to realize about coding. So thank you for doing that. And the second thing is, what are you planning on doing with, what are they doing with all the studies for the plastics in the ocean?
So the data that I use will be a comparison data set, will be to a pilot's data. So there's a pilot partnering with the same researcher flying a plane from the North Pole to the South Pole. And they're gathering microfiber samples from way high up in the atmosphere. And so we'll be able to compare, first of all, how those data sets compare, and then also most of the microfibers are in the air near where we live. So the question is, are they also far away from where we live because they're coming out of the sea spread? So that's what the researcher is going to look into, and he's part of a network of other researchers too, so they may be able to do even more with it.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to everyone who tuned in live via YouTube. Thanks for joining us today. A shout out to those who are going to view it throughout the day and view it throughout the week. Thank you to our group in Stafford Springs, Connecticut, for doing some questions live for us. And then a huge shout out to you, Tez. You've got a couple weeks to go. I can only imagine how it feels with something you've worked on so long. You know, putting all those supplies into the boat and knowing that it's coming. We're really excited to follow along, and obviously wishing you the best of luck and looking forward to updates from the ocean.
Thank you so much, Joe, and thank you to all the students for your questions and interest today, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, good luck, Tez, and we're going to sign off for today.
Good deal. Take care, everybody.